Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the P&GP, Personnel and General Purposes meeting. If I go through the agenda, I must ask if there are any appointments of any substitutes.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, we do have some substitutes tonight. Jenny Barnes is here for Adrian Gregson, for James Stanley. I know we've had a couple of apologies as well from Councillor Mark Bayliss and from David Blake, Managing Director.
Okay, thank you. I've also had, via another means, apologies from Councillor Lucy Hodgson as well. So we're a bit thin on the ground tonight. Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you very much, Steve. If we go to any declarations of interest, I'm assuming we don't all need to declare a declaration because we're elected members and we're dealing with voting issues. Good. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Public participation. Unless they're very small, there's no one down there. Excellent, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Rather than me read through all of the pages, if people are content with those minutes, are we happy to move on? Excellent, thank you. So we go to agenda item 5, which is the Corporate Health and Safety and Welfare Policy paper. And it's just as interesting that we have the Health and Safety Ambassador with us today. So I'm sure all the difficult questions are coming from Louis. Ambassador? Champion? Same thing. Are you presenting that, Sean? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, tonight you're being asked to approve and adopt the Council's revised Corporate Health and Safety Policy. It's now called the Health and Safety and Welfare Policy. The document was last updated and reviewed in December 2018 and it was scheduled for a review. In undertaking the review, I've worked closely with the Council's Corporate Health and Safety Officer, who's given us professional advice on making sure that our overarching corporate policy aligns with Health and Safety Executive best practice. And fundamentally, the policy that the Council already had on corporate health served us well and was a document that set out the general management systems that the Council operates. But we've taken the opportunity in revising the policy to make it a bit clearer, to make sure that there isn't duplication with procedures that might sit underneath it, and to make sure that its reach is adequate insofar as the types of customers that and users that it covers, and that we're explaining clearly what we want in terms of our health and safety culture and so forth. So at Section 2.4 of the covering report, we've summarised what the key changes to the policy are. And just to recognise some of those, I won't read them all out. The Council's duties towards welfare as an employer, and we'll come back to employer in the broadest sense, we've made that more explicit. And again, that's in line with the Health and Safety Executive guidance that health and safety includes welfare. As I say, it's supposed to be a slightly simpler read now and to navigate. We've been clear in terms of the roles that different groups and individuals within the Council play, both in terms of accountability but also continuous improvement as a separate behaviour. And that really leads to the point about the positive culture of health and safety, that it's not just about compliance, it's about trying to do better and better and promote improvement culture within the organisation. As I say, we've referenced it against the Health and Safety Executive systems. We've been clear also in this revision that what do we mean by employer in the context of health and safety, and it doesn't always just mean employees. In the context of health and safety, it means workers, councillors, customers and the public. So we've been clearer what our duties are. And I just want to make that point in the context of councillors, because I know it's something that we've discussed at group leaders meetings, that councillors not only are the sponsors of this policy as the overall employer, they're also beneficiaries of the policy. They're entitled to be protected by a safe working culture at the council. I know that, you know, that's important for councillors as they go about their business in So we've made that more explicit, and similarly references to volunteers and workers and other people who might not perhaps typically be classified as employees. We've made sure there's a glossary to help with the sort of accessibility of the document. And we've put in the appendix what the health and safety arrangements are that underpin this policy. And I thought that was important because when you read an overarching corporate health and safety policy, it might otherwise feel rather generic. And of course, for a council, we carry out a whole range of different functions. And this particular council, we have a lot of our municipal services in-house, well, all of our services in-house. Therefore, we are carrying out quite a lot of health and safety risky activities necessarily. So I thought it was important that we showed what all the arrangements documents were, the specific risks this council's managing that sit beneath the generic policy. So recommended to you tonight is the revised policy. In terms of the input we've had into the drafting of this, we've been very grateful to have the opportunity to take it through different groups for consultation. We've taken it through managers and we've also spent some time discussing the detail with the council's elected member health and safety champion. And we've been grateful to do that because one of the improvements we've made as a result of that feedback is to draw out this point about the culture and the continuous improvement environment as distinct from just the compliance environment. So that has been very helpful. And also we've talked about this policy with the JCSC committee, the Council Statutory Committee for Health and Safety, and we've explored some of the terminology within it and the reach of the document. So I do feel on its passage to this committee tonight, it's had a good airing. There are no significant implications in adopting the policy, but I would say clearly now that we have a corporate health and safety policy on our website with a date that's expired, I think it's very important we get this refreshed and updated. Sitting beneath it, as well as the arrangements documents, will be training, and we've been working with managers to understand what sort of training is meaningful for staff, so that the messages are really understood, and it's recognised that some of that needs to be face-to-face. We already do toolbox talks and on-site direct delivery, but we recognise that we need to do more face-to-face training to supplement those operational discussions and learning that we do.
Thank you very much, Sian. Comprehensive briefing. Any questions from anyone? I've got Louis, and then I've got Steve, thank you, and then I've got Lynn.
First of all, thank you very much for the report. I'm very pleased to see the role of health and safety champion being highlighted, and also the role of whistleblowers, I think, is highlighted in the procedure. As you say, there's been lots of consultation, and I haven't really got anything major to add to that. But the one thing I did want to ask is, very often with policies and procedures, they can be something which is filed, put into onto a file somewhere or on a computer drive. So my question really is about how to make this a live document, and really to ask how are we going to ensure that all of our staff are aware of this procedure. I know from the limited amount of walking around that I've done, the health and safety, often we have a health and safety notice board in various departments. Quite often it's sort of a little bit dusty, needs bringing into refreshing and being kept alive. Just really asking how we can do this, because just perhaps sending an email out or even just putting it on a notice board probably isn't enough. Some briefings and so on, and cascading to say that.
Through you, Chair. I absolutely agree. It's not the ambition of this document to go and sit on an intranet and be accessed. And also, although we've made efforts to make the language accessible, it can be a barrier to some people to sort of, they think of it as a I do take the point. Specifically, what we intend to do is make adoption of the new policy and the training that sits beneath it is owned and managed by the wider management team, which in our organisation is managers that report into heads of service. The wider management team, we've discussed with our lead who looks after the agenda for that. We've about making sure that some of these corporate pervasive responsibilities are refreshed through those meetings, and the wider management team meets face to face and has agenda items that they discuss. So there's a physical place to come together and raise awareness and deliver training to those. And those are people who supervise. So that's a really important level, I think, in terms of the health and safety culture. But wider management team also has a sort of Microsoft Teams channel and chat, and it's quite living and it's quite an active environment. Above that level, you've got the corporate management team, and again, that's been refreshed recently with the arrival of service, and the leadership team are very keen that the corporate management team owns some of these, what we call business excellence pieces of work, and they make sure that the foot doesn't come off the gas during the year. So we want those levels of management to sort of own this, really, but specifically in terms of training, we are commissioning some of the arrangements that sit below it. So, for example, the management of infection risk, and also what we call officers in charge of buildings. So if you are the officer in charge of the building, all the fire safety responsibilities that you have when you're in charge. Those are two examples. Personal safety, we've talked about. We've got that coming for staff. So if you like, at an arrangements level, there will
I've got Steve Mackay and then I've got Lynn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's very clear and very informative document. And I think it also goes a long way to show to employees, councillors, and everybody else how much we actually value their work ethic and getting things right for them. I've read through the whole thing, and I've only picked up on one point, and it's something that might be me being pernickety or whatever, but at paragraph 4.15, page 21, the very last bullet point, it says not to engage in acts of horseplay, practical jokes, or acts likely to cause harm or injury to themselves or anyone else. I think we're setting ourselves a bit of a high threshold there about that. And I think I would prefer to see or acts which may cause harm. If anybody's being challenged about it, it is a balance of probabilities thing. And but I welcome your comments.
Well, through you, Chair, I mean, I'm grateful for feedback on wording, and it is important that we get it right. So if the committee would prefer a different word, I would support that. I think that, as you say, acts that may or acts that could is certainly a lower threshold than likely. This is all this duty of care point about the duty of care that you owe to another person, not to put them in harm's way, really.
Yeah, I think we've got a nod of heads around, so we can support that change. Thanks, Steve. Lynn.
Yes, thank you. I mean, just to welcome this policy coming to today's committee. I had the opportunity of looking at it at the joint committee. Approve it at that point there. I think, adding, it is a clearer document than previously. I think adding welfare in is a really important and emphasises, that we have a responsibility to our staff. And I think with COVID, actually the place of sort of health and safety at work and welfare, it's put very much a renewed focus on that. So to have an updated policy, it's also a fantastic legacy for the corporate health and safety officer, who unfortunately is moving on because she's so good, she's been poached, but she's done great work, and this absolutely will sort of stand her achievement.
Thank you, Lynn. I'll just pick up, it's actually what picking up on what Louis said, and I guess to a little bit what Steve said about putting a document away. I agree with you, Louis, they shouldn't be put away. However, if we have a culture then the document doesn't have to be there. If people understand, and I think the work that's gone into this will help us develop that culture of being an organisation, bearing in mind we do risky stuff on a daily basis, and get involved in risky things when floods and whatever, that understand that we have to be aware of health and safety, but we will always have to, our staff often will be in risky positions or have to take risks, but only take risks that you have analysed beforehand, justifiable risks as opposed to reckless risks. And I think this document's a good measure of growing. It'll be interesting in a year's time or 2 years, and you're the champion, of whether it's difficult to ascertain whether that culture, whether you see it's because it's less near misses, or whether it's because you see people saying, actually, we shouldn't be doing that, but we should do this, or just improvements. It'll be interesting to see how that culture matures over time.
Just to add a little bit to what you just said there, I guess we would measure success if we get more near misses. Yeah.
Agree. More people are reporting it because they're more aware of it. You're exactly right. Yeah. Jenny, please.
Thank you. Obviously, I haven't had the full background of all of this, but the document appears to be very clear and concise, which is always a good thing. How much did we actually look at other councils and look at their best practice to come up with this? Seems to be a very good document.
Yes, I did set that as part of the brief. We hadn't, this council had an existing corporate health and safety policy, so we used that as the template. So we're not sharing a track changes tonight, but it does look a little like the last one, put it that way. But we did look around at what other councils did, but the corporate health and safety officer steered us back to the health and safety executive's guidance, what your overarching policy should be. So I'm quite comfortable that our policy looks like many other councils, but I'm more comfortable and satisfied that it represents the HSE best practice in describing, it's describing the management systems by which you organise yourself to make effectively everybody responsible for health and safety, but then you're clear how that's and it's this plan, do, act behaviour that's required. So yes, I would imagine a number of councils have followed a similar template, but I think the assurance point is it lines up with what's required of us from the.
Thank you, Sean. If that's the case, then we will approve the changes made. We need to vote on this. We do, don't we? We need to vote. Policy. Everyone happy to adopt the new policy? Please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you. Carried. Excellent. So if you now move on to agenda item 6. Wrong. Yes, 6. Postal vote. How many times have we done this?
Thank you, Chair. The last meeting, I presented a report of our review of the postal vote arrangements following the last election, and members requested an update of progress on the arrangements we're putting in place to ensure that we don't have an occurrence of the problem which we encountered then, of a small number not being sent on a timely basis. They are set out in the appendix to the report, and I'm pleased to state that steps 1 and steps 2 are already completed. We're completed by the end of February. The remaining stages relate to the delivery of postal vote data across to Civica Electoral Services, who are provided in this, and then on to the post office. The conclusion from the previous report was that the root of the problem was multiple elections taking place at the same time, with multiple types of voting taking place, and multiple file transfers arising as a result of that. Whereas in this case, there will be only 3 file transfers, and they will all be of the same. In each case, we will produce a statement of the number of packs which have been through the express system and transferred to the provider. They will send us back a statement of how many they've received. We'll then get a statement of how many have been printed to be delivered to the Royal Mail for delivery, and they will sign a certificate to say how many they've collected delivery. We'll check that at each stage, and once we've got to a point where they are postal votes ready and printed ready, we'll have the opportunity to go along and check them. I'll do that myself, so we've got that extra quality control check there. And then finally, once they've been delivered, we'll be doing some random checks to make sure that those people who should have received postal votes have received them. So we'll get any early warnings if there are any problems. But as I've said, under these circumstances, the risks of there being any problems are practically to zero, and I think that there's every reason to be sure. Well, happy to take any questions if members.
Okay, I've got Jenny and Louis.
Thank you. The re-registration of postal voters was due to be in by yesterday to a central place in London, I believe. How quickly will that information come back to the council, and so that we can remove people who haven't re-registered from the postal vote list? Get an idea of what percentage have failed to reapply.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure Shane will be able to answer that, but I'm not sure whether it's relative to this paper. But please.
You, Chair, I'm not in a position to answer it. I will make some inquiries and provide a written response if you're happy with that, Jenny.
Thank you, Shane. Louis.
Okay, thank you very much for the report. From my reading of this report, it looks like there's quite a lot of detail and some significant changes and further sort of explanation about the processes, which is quite nice to see. And I really do appreciate things like the quality assurance steps, by things like checking the outcomes with samples, and seeing that in a procedure is very good. I've just got a question though about if you like, this is sort of the end result, saying this is what we're going to do, this is our procedure. But I'm sort of quite interested in the process of how you got there. By that, what I sort of mean is that when we were discussing this in the last committee meeting, we talked about having some sort of systematic approach of looking at all the steps, finding out or trying to determine what the failures of each of those things could be, and then looking at what things we can do in a systematic way to then put corrective actions in before they even go wrong. And as I say, I'm really appreciative of the result, but the question really is that the process that you did, that you went through and did a systematic assessment of the failures, the failure modes, the types of failures you could have, so that then you could put corrective actions in? Is that what you did or not?
Through you, Chair, I think up to a point would be the answer to that, because you obviously, Louis, pointed to a rather systemic scientific approach to it. Well, the approach that we've taken and take with every election every year is to go through all of the to sit down and have a post-electoral review. That takes place every year, and the team work together, and then the last couple of years, those discussions, work through all of the issues which arose, any considerations, and that includes wider considerations such as voters to exercise their rights, and work systematically through each one of those and say, well, is this an area where so it's along those lines, but it's less scientific and systematic as the approach which you're there in terms of.
I guess what I'm sort of asking is that when there's been a problem, obviously you go and look at the root causes of what caused that particular problem. But next time, there'll be another problem, and it'll be something else. And my question really is about having that systematic approach about looking what things could go wrong and actually doing something about them before they become a problem, rather than the reactive style of quality management, which is basically looking at what problem happened and just sort of plugging up the gap of that particular problem. And it's a great process to learn from and improve that continuous improvement. But it's the proactive approach that I think I was.
Going through you, Chair, yes, that is the post-election exercise that we carry out and try to take any lessons that we've learned forward into the next. But before each coming election, there's also a process of setting out various stages. So there's a very detailed project plan for each of the elections, sets out the key stages for each one. That, again, is subject to review. Is there anything here that is going to cause problems?
Great. That's what I'm after.
What have we learned from last
Thank you.
time to have a bearing on that? So that process, yes, takes place.
It's forward
every year.
planning
It's
and
a
thinking
forward
ahead.
planning, yeah. And we're building every year on experience from that. And that's not just here, everywhere I've worked in terms of elections, that's a very detailed process. Minimise.
Shane, thank you. You satisfied the two engineers in here who were looking for the word of Famika. But no, yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same, it's just different language. But no, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I think, if I'd like to speak on behalf of everyone, and I include all the councillors, I think we're more confident now that we are less likely to see issues in the future around postal voting and people's liberty to vote. Lynn.
I'm amazed you managed to get to that conversation without saying root cause analysis. Or is that just show up my background and where I come from? Yes, I mean, thank you for bringing the very detailed plans for this year, which is what the committee asked for. It does illustrate, the potential, the complexity and the importance of being completely rigorous about process and, multiple data transfers, even with one local election, but it's still several wards, several, loads of candidates, etc. It's a very important task, and in some ways, I'm amazed it hadn't gone wrong before, so to speak. That it was really, really unfortunate what happened last year, but it was identified and it was pretty well rectified in time. But thank you for the job that you do, and yeah, we obviously all need to keep a really close eye on process and feedback any glitches as and when.
Thank you, Lynn. I've got Louis again. Oh, sorry, did you want to go back on that, Shane? Apologies.
Well, just to add through you, Chair, that key to a lot of this is the use of the express system, which lines out and de-risks a lot of it, and it's used by local authorities across the country. We are extending some of the use of that coming election, so we're building in steps to try and use the system as fully as we can to minimise any risks. So we're trying to add on.
Thank you, Shane. Louis.
Just a thought that from what Lynn was just saying, that it's obviously really important that we learn from previous mistakes. We also should be planning ahead for the next lot of elections. Just a suggestion, I don't know whether this is accepted or not, but obviously every election will be slightly different. So this particular election, we're going to have a by-election as well. And another, potentially.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, potentially we might have a by-election. And in other elections, there might be a ward boundary change, or there might be a concurrent election, and so on. So I'm just wondering whether you could have a line, perhaps, in this procedure that says, look at the differences, and if there's anything new, consider any changes in a systematic way for this particular election, so that you're looking at, because like you said before, one of the reasons why we had problems last time was because there were 3 elections on the same day. So maybe there should be a line in the procedure that says, check for differences, learn, think ahead of what those differences might be.
Point, Louis. Shane's scribbling it down, so he's also taken it up. Any more questions? Steve?
Only to say that corporate knowledge is a wonderful thing. Don't go anywhere.
It's a very good point. Lots of, there's a hypocritical story I'm going to prefabricate now, of Sellafield Nuclear Power Station, and when it dumped its nuclear waste, it dumps it into the sea, and it does it at a set time. And the man who was responsible for doing this, true story by the way, man who was responsible for doing this, it said, you know, dump the waste at 10 o'clock every morning. And when he retired after 35 years or whatever it was, next guy comes along, says dump it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and all the wastage, not nuclear obviously, but all the way was getting washed up on sea. And what they hadn't realised was the man who dumped it prior to then had the knowledge and knew about the tides. And even though it said dump it at 10, he know you don't dump it at 10, dump it at 11:30 today because the tide's gone. Little things like corporate knowledge that can get lost because it's not written down. It's used in lots of business skills. But yeah, but you're exactly right. Corporate knowledge, getting it written down or passing that corporate knowledge on, which is why succession planning is so important. But yeah, sorry. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the point about change management. An auditor by profession, and our starting point would always be what's different from last year. So it's built into the and I would add that the repository of knowledge from the organisation doesn't lie with me primarily, but with Claire and her team, who are absolutely exceptional. Can do without them.
Thank you. Yeah, we should all acknowledge Claire's team. Any other business? Does anyone, if I go around the table, Louis, Lynn, Jenny, Steve, officers? In which case, I'll draw this meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your evening. Liverpool kick off in 45 minutes, so I'd like to say I'll be back for it, but I've not, because my wife's told me I'm going out for dinner tonight, so never mind.